everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're doing a really fun bag. Okay, so you should probably know what bag it is based on the title of the video. But today's bag is by Swoon. We all know how much I love Swoon bags. And it is the Dallas Vintage Duffel Bag. Yes, this is what we needed. We've done so many purses and clutches. We need a good, big bag. And this is the small version of the bag. So let's just kind of go over it real quick, and then we'll dive into the video. Hi there. Oh my gosh. Okay, there's a lot going on in this bag. But you don't have to do all of it. You can make this bag very, much, like all of it. Or you can make it super simple. So let's talk about how I made it, a lot. So I used quilt block. So this is a quilt block, and then this is a quilt block. And then I just added some extra layers on the side to kind of beef it up so that it's the right size for the bag. These quilt blocks were both EPP, which is English paper piecing quilt blocks. They were part of a sew-along with Mr. Domestic. If I can find the links for them, I'll put them down in the description below. These were really fun to make, and I think you can still download the templates to make them. So I will have that. I handmade all of my straps, so I made the top straps and the long strap using cork fabric. And then I added the piping all around the sides of the bag. And then we have a, where is it? Okay, then we have a recessed zipper right here, which is, so you can put some like your phone or something basic out there, or like your plane tickets if you're traveling. And then the inside, I've got it full of stuffing, but you have a nice big zipper along the top. And then the inside has another recessed pocket. So when I was originally looking at this bag, I was like, whoo, I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's got a lot going on it. That seems like it might be kind of a complicated bag, but it does not have to be, okay? You can use webbing, which is what I'm going to be using today. Webbing is this stuff. It's just this cotton or nylon webbing that you can buy on Amazon. It's not much money. I'll have links down below, but you can use webbing instead of making your own straps. You don't have to add the piping. The piping is a really fun add-on, but you don't have to put that on the bag if you don't want to. You don't have to add the recessed zippers. If you're afraid of these recessed zippers, because I know it's kind of crazy, like a recessed zipper is a zipper that is put into a piece of fabric. Like you cut a hole and put the zipper in the fabric. A lot of people are like, I don't want to do that. You don't have to do that. Don't do the recessed zippers. Don't do the piping. Use the webbing for the handles and for the strap. And now you just have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of fabric and your lining and some interfacing and some webbing. And you have a pretty basic bag that is heck useful. So this is the small size. I don't know if you can see me wearing it. Hi there. Yeah, you can't see me. I'm too short. But this is the small size. This is the bottom, if you want to see the bottom. It is super cute. Probably one of the most useful bags you'll have. So I see this for like sports activities or the gym. Now today I'm going to be making the medium size, which is going to be bigger. So if you're not already a subscriber, please consider clicking the subscribe button down below. If at any point you like this video, give it a like. Any questions, comments, things you want to say, shout outs, put them down in the comment section down below. The very first comment in the comment section will be pinned. It'll be a comment from me, and it has all the timestamps for this video. So if there's just one step of the pattern you're struggling with, go down there. It'll be there. Click the number, and it's going to take you straight there in the video, skipping all the jib-jab. Don't forget that we now have a Facebook group, so if you want to join a community of makers who are sharing things they make from this channel, things they make from other patterns, other channels, questions, it will be linked down below. Just search for us on Facebook. We're the OklaRoots Creatives. All right, let's get started. So what you're going to need most of here is fabric and interfacing. You're going to need 1 yard of exterior fabric. Now this can be a quilt cotton or this can be a canvas. I would honestly say you could also use cotton lycra since you are going to be interfacing it with some cotton woven interfacing. You're going to need 1.5 yards of lining fabric. Now I'm just using quilt cotton for this. So if you're going to make your own straps using quilt cotton, you're also going to need 1 2/3 yard of fabric for that step. Since we're using webbing, we actually don't need that. Now here's the big behemoth. You're going to need 6 yards of fusible woven interfacing. Now that is a lot. You're right. 6 yards is a lot of anything really, But this is a big bag and everything needs to be stabilized really well. So find yourself a bolt of SF101 or try Barb's bags for woven fuse. You just want a lot of it for this project. You're also going to need 1 yard of fusible fleece. I am using Pellon Fusible Thermolam Plus today. Another type of interfacing you're going to need just a small bit of is this Pellon Peltex. Now this is going to be for the bottom of the bag. This is going to make sure the bottom of the bag doesn't get squishy but actually stays very firm. Honestly, if you don't mind your bag being squishy on the bottom, you don't need this. You can skip this. So this was something I would consider optional. You're going to need a 20-inch long handbag zipper. These are usually just a little bit wider zippers. They have a little bit wider of teeth. I'm using zipper tape today. I get this from Sally Tomato. I really, really like her zipper tape, and she comes with an assortment of pulls. If you're going to be doing the recessed zippers, you're also going to need 2 9-inch all-purpose zippers. Again, I would say this is optional. The zipper tape or the top zipper is not optional. You want to be able to close your bag. But these recessed zippers, if you don't want to do recessed zippers, you don't need them. I will be showing you how to install both of them today. Just remember that anytime I'm referring to the recessed zippers, those are optional steps. If you're going to be using webbing today instead of making your own straps, you're going to need 2 yards of 1.5-inch thick webbing. I got this off of Amazon. This is nylon webbing, and I'm pretty sure I should not iron that, but we're going to test it out today. Also, if you're using the webbing, you're going to need 4 yards of 1-inch wide webbing. These are going to be for the handles. The 1.5-inch webbing is for the long handle, the crossbody handle. The 1-inch webbing is for the shorter 2 handles. All right, now let's talk about hardware. You're going to need 2 1.5-inch swivel clips. I got these from Joann's. You're going to also need 2 1-inch D-rings. These are from Emmeline Bags. And you're going to need 1 1.5-inch slider. I got this as a 2-pack from Joann's. If you're going to be using piping, you're going to need 2.5 yards of pre-made piping. Now, I made this by hand. I believe you can buy it in the store as well. If you want a great tutorial for how to make this, I will have a video down below for Dana from Made Every Day. She has a fantastic video that I followed in order to make my piping. So then we're going to go into our basic tools. You're going to need your thread. I suggest using 40-weight thread. As always, I'm using Orfil. My needle today is going to be an 80-12 Microtex needle. If you're doing the recessed zippers, I suggest either having a glue stick or some of this wash away wonder tape. This is going to make installing the recessed zippers much, much easier. You should also have a marking tool. I'm using this Clover Mark tool and a generous amount of clips. All right, let's move on to cutting out our pattern pieces. So she has 3 different sizes in this pattern. Make sure when you're following the pattern, you highlight, underline, circle, something, which sizes you're working with. For the pattern, she's going to be using the medium size measurements, but she does make note at every point for the small and the large sizes. I'll be doing the medium duffel today. All right, from the main panel, you're going to need 2 exterior cuts and 2 lining cuts. All 4 of these cuts need to be interfaced with your cotton woven interfacing. In addition to those 4 cuts, you're going to need 2 main panel cuts with the fusible fleece. So if you're going to be making the exterior recessed zipper, you're going to also need this lining pocket panel. This will need to be interfaced with your woven interfacing. From your Peltex, you're going to need your bottom support. Since we are using the webbing, we can skip the handles, adjustable strap, and strap connectors. But if you're making your own using quilt cotton, make sure you make note of the measurements for that. Those will all need to be interfaced with woven interfacing. And if you're doing the recessed zipper on the inside of the bag, you're going to need your lining pocket panel. This will also need to be interfaced with your woven interfacing. In addition to the main panels, you're going to need your side panels. Now, these are made using a template that's available in the pattern. When printing the pattern, make sure you print the templates at 100% using Adobe Acrobat Reader. And also make note of which size you're using. The pattern does have 3 different sizes. Make sure you cut out the right shape. I'm using the medium size. You're going to need 2 exterior, both interfaced with woven interfacing, 2 lining, also interfaced with woven interfacing, and 2 fusible fleece cuts using those side panel templates. So now we're going to start prepping our pieces for installation of the exterior recessed zipper. If you're skipping the recessed zipper on the outside, go ahead and skip over this step. So grab one of your exterior main panels of fusible fleece and lay it so that it's sticky side down. So you should have the soft side, the non-fusible side up. So we're going to want to mark a rectangle that is 2.5 inches from the bottom and 3.5 inches from the left side. And the entire rectangle needs to be 10 inches by 1.5 inches wide. So I just measure from the top 2.5 inches and just make kind of a general mark like that. And then I measure over 3.5 inches from the side and make another mark. So my rectangle needs to go in this area. So it needs to be 1.5 inches wide. So I'll use my previous 3.5 inch mark to line up my rectangle. And it needs to be 10 inches long. So I'm just going to go down to 10 inches. Just like that. And then just mark a bottom line. Now we have our rectangle for our recessed zipper. Now all you need to do is cut out this rectangle. The purpose of this is to make sure that the fusible fleece doesn't bulk up our seams when we're installing the recessed zipper. We've already got enough layers going on in there. We don't need the fusible fleece getting in the way. All right, after you have your rectangle cut out, now we need to trim off 1 inch off the top edge. So if it makes it easier for you to remember the top, you can make yourself a little mark like that. Just so when we go to install this later, we don't mix up which side our square is on. So just grab a longer ruler. Use your 1 inch mark and chop off 1 inch. All right, so you can put this piece to the side. Now grab your other fusible fleece panel and just cut off 1 inch off the top edge. So the top edge is the longer edge. All right, and remove that top edge. So now we're going to fuse the fusible fleece on. Take this to your ironing board or grab your pressing mat. Grab an exterior main panel and then take your fusible fleece with the rectangle in it and line it up with the bottom of your exterior main panel. I'm going to remove the mat for now. So line up your fusible fleece with the bottom of your exterior main panel, and it should be about 1 inch shorter at the top since we cut off that inch up there. And just kind of adjust it if you need to. And to fuse fusible fleece, you want to iron it from the fabric side, not the fleece side. All right, once you have your fusible fleece with the hole fused onto the exterior main panel, grab your other exterior main panel and apply the second fusible fleece without a hole to the back of your other exterior main panel. Now make sure you note direction here. If your exterior main panel has an image or something and you want it to be a certain direction, the top of the exterior main panel is going to have that 1 inch gap between the top of the fabric and the top of the fleece. Just like before, flip the whole thing so that it's fabric side up and fuse your fusible fleece from the top. All right, you should now have your fusible fleece attached to both exterior main panels. Now grab your fusible fleece end panel, cut with a sticky side up, and take your exterior end cut and lay it wrong side down so that the sticky side is facing the back of the side panel. And then just fuse on your fusible fleece to your exterior side panels. So now we're moving on to step 2, which is putting in the exterior zippered pocket. If you're skipping this step, go ahead and skip the step. Grab your exterior piece that has the rectangle cut out in the fleece and lay it so that it is fleece side up. Now we're going to want to mark a 1/2 inch by a 9 inch box inside of our rectangle. Easiest way to do this is to measure 4 inches from the side and then measure 3 inches from the top. And then you can just measure a 1/2 inch from your first line and 9 inches down from that top line. If you notice that it's not quite centered, you can just kind of nudge it down a little bit. So now I have a nice centered block. All right, so this might be a little complicated. Flip your panel over so that you have the right side of the exterior main panel in front of you with the top up. Remember, the top has the gap on the fleece on the very top. Now grab your vertical lining panel and lay it right side down. Now, we want this to measure up with the rectangle on the back, but that can be difficult to do since we can't see it. However, we know where the gap is. So if we just measure about 2 inches down from the top, you can use your chalk to mark a line. And then go about 3 inches from the side
and mark another line. Again, I would only do this with chalk. I wouldn't do this with the friction pens. So now we have a white line going horizontal and a white line going vertical. And all we have to do is just kind of nest our lining pocket panel into that corner, just like that. Now, just to make sure we're good, I like to grab some pins and pin the edges of my pocket around the area where the hole is. Now flip over your panel so that you can look at the back of it. Now, as long as my pins are outside of this rectangle, I'm good. So my pins are all outside of my drawn rectangle, so we are going to be okay. This doesn't have to be precise. You just want to make sure that your pocket panel covers this rectangle here. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're just going to sew along this rectangle at a 2.5 millimeter stitch length all the way around. Alright, once you have that stitched down, you can go ahead and remove all your pins. Okay, so now grab your ruler and we're going to mark a line that is centered along this rectangle and stops about 1/2 inch from each edge. Since the rectangle is 1/2 inch wide, I know that I need to mark a line that's 1/4 inch in. So I do it like that, and then I go ahead and I mark my 1/2 inch mark. So I do 1/2 inch from one of the shorter edge, and then 1/2 inch from the other shorter edge. And then you can use your ruler for this, but you just want to mark a diagonal line from that intersection to each corner. Like that. Or you can just kind of eyeball it. Now we just want to cut along this middle line and these diagonals. To get started, you can use a seam ripper. And what you're doing is you're ripping through the exterior, the interfacing, and the pocket panel, all of them, all the way through. Make a little hole just like that, and then use your scissors to finish it up. Again, you're going through all of the layers of fabric. Once you get to that tip of your triangle, you're just going to cut in all the way to the threads. Don't cut your stitching, but man, get so close to it that you're kissing it. The closer you get to your stitching, the better it's going to look on the opposite end. And since this is on the exterior of the bag, we want this part to look pretty good. Now you're going to take your vertical pocket piece and you're just going to shove it through that hole so that it comes to the back of the exterior piece, just like that. All right, now we just want to smooth this out as best we can. So pull the small piece that's on the top through, and I like to finger press this first, and then I'll actually press it with my iron. If you notice a whole bunch of crinkling and creasing at your corners, it's because you didn't get close enough to those threads. And I know you're probably like, yes, I did. I got so close. If I get any closer, I'm going to cut them. You didn't get quite close enough. You got to get dangerously close to those threads. That's what I've learned, because I always swore I got super close to them, and then I got the crinkles. All right, once you've kind of fingered pressed it as much as you can, let's get the iron in here to help us out. And I like to flip it over to the front and press it on that side as well, just to make sure it all looks nice and clean. So once you have it pressed, it should look something like this. Now we're going to attach the zipper. Okay, so the way I like to attach my zippers is first, I'm going to grab some of my double-sided Dritz tape and I apply it just to the very, very edge of the zipper. Now you can see my zipper is longer than it needs to be. I prefer to work with longer zippers, and then I cut them down after I stitch them in. So I'm just going to apply a good line here and cut it, and I'm going to do the same for the bottom part. And then you can go ahead and remove the paper part of the sticky, so you just have tape and tape. All right, I like to work this way. I like to see my zipper while I'm applying it to my pocket. So what I do is I just kind of line it up so that it looks centered. And if I have to kind of adjust or roll the lining a little bit so that it's not peeking out, I'll do that now. Just nice and gentle. If your zipper pull is outside of the opening, go ahead and pull that into the opening, but then pull it all the way to the edge. That makes it easier to have it all lined up really nicely. Now it's all nice and stuck in there, and this is going to make applying it much, much easier because I don't have to worry about the zipper slipping out of place while I'm stitching it. So let's take this to the machine. All right, so now I have the zipper attached to my outer panel. Now we just have to finish up the pocket. If you used a longer zipper tape like I did, go ahead and trim it down now. Just bring it inside of the lining. Now take the bottom edge of your vertical pocket panel and line it up with the top edge that is closest to the zipper and just pin it in place. I like to use clips to just kind of go around all 3 loose edges. All right, now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along all 3 edges of our pocket using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure when you're sewing this, you don't sew through the main panel. We're only sewing through the layers of the pocket panel. Alright, so now you should have your recessed pocket all done for your exterior main panel. Now we're going to repeat these steps to add the recessed pocket to the lining panel. Again, if you don't want to do that, that is totally optional, but I am going to walk you through how to do the second one as well. So grab your lining main panel and we're going to flip it right side down. First, let's find our center by folding our panel in half and then just finger pressing where the middle is. And then if you want, you can go ahead and take a pen and just mark right on that crease. We're going to make a box that's 3 inches down from the top, and I'm just going to draw a basic line, just like that. Again, this pocket needs to be 9 inches by 1/2 inch. So since it needs to be 9 inches and centered, I know I need 4.5 inches on each side of my midpoint. So I'm just going to line up my 4.5 inch mark with that midpoint and make sure my line is straight. And I'll just draw a 1/2 inch over here. And then I'll just flip my ruler and do the same thing. And now my mark should line up with the 9 inch mark. And then I'll just draw another 1/2 inch. And then I'll use my ruler to draw a 1/2 inch line beneath the other horizontal line. There we go. Now, once again, we need to add our pocket. This is your lining pocket piece. We're going to add this to the right side of the lining panel. So flip your panel so that it's right side up. Again, you might want to mark your midpoint on the other side. This panel needs to be centered and it needs to be about 2 inches down from the top of the lining. So I'm just going to take my ruler and I'm going to put my 6 inch line on my mark and I'm going to line it up 2 inches. So my 2 inch line is along the top of my lining panel. My 6 inch line is on my midpoint mark. That way I just know it's the middle. And then I'm going to take my lining panel and I'm going to mark the midpoint on one of the shorter ends. And I'm going to line that up with my 6 inch mark, just like this. And it's also going to be lined up with the bottom of my ruler. So I'm going to pin this down all along the edges just to make sure I am completely enclosing my rectangle that I drew. All right, so let's turn it over. And as long as all of my pins are outside of my rectangle, I know I'm okay. All right, so now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this rectangle using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. All right, once you have your pocket sewn on, you can go ahead and take out your pins. And now we're going to draw our cut line. Now remember, this is going to be a middle line down the center of a rectangle, and it's going to start and stop a 1/2 inch away from the shorter ends. So I like to just mark my 1/4 inch line first, since that is 1/2 inch. There we go. And then mark 1/2 inch from one shorter end. And then 1/2 inch from the other short end. And then just make diagonals from those intersections to the corners. Use your seam ripper to go through all of the layers again and get your hole started. And then use your scissors to finish it. All the way to that tip of the triangle. And then just cut right up to those stitches as close as you can get. I mean, you feel like you're about to cut them, but don't cut them. But so close that you feel like you're going to. All right, now we just push the pocket through that hole so that it's wrong side of pocket against wrong side of lining fabric. And we're gonna press this. All right, once you have it all pressed, we can go ahead and attach the zipper. Grab your other zipper. And just like before, I'm going to use this double-sided tape. You could also use a fine glue stick, but I find the tape works really well. And then I have my zipper right side up, and I take my lining panel so that the lining is right side up, not the pocket, and I just center it over the tape and push it down the way I want it to look. This allows me to get the straightest zipper. Once I have it pretty much the way I want it, I go ahead and I move my zipper down so that it's inside of my rectangle. And then I just close it, just like that. And go ahead and adjust it so it's just the way you want it. And then we can take this to the sewing machine. We're going to sew this on at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to use a 3mm top stitch. We're just going to go around the entire rectangle. Alright, so now your zipper should be attached just like that. Now all we have to do is close up the pocket panel. Again, if you used a longer zipper tape, go ahead and trim that down now. So now take the bottom part of your pocket and line it up with the top part of the pocket. So you should have a folded edge on the bottom and then 2 side edges that are loose and a top edge that is loose. So we're going to go ahead and just clip all the 3 edges together. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew just along the edges of the pocket panel. We're not sewing on the lining. And we're going to sew along all 3 of them at a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance using a 2.5mm stitch length. All right, you should now have both of your recessed zippers attached. So now we're going to skip step 3 since we are not building our own straps, and we're going to move on to step 4, which is attaching the handles. So grab your exterior panel that has the pocket panel and pull out your pocket panel so that it is out of the way. Now we're going to mark a few lines on this before we start attaching things. You're going to want to mark a line that's 7.5 inches from either of the sides. So grab your ruler, go to 7.5 inches, grab a longer ruler, and I like to use my chalk pen for this. It's a little bit tricky since my fabric is a light color. It will be hard to see it. So there's one end. I'm going to do the same for the other edge. 7.5 inches in. Move this out of the way for a minute. Since we're using the webbing, we need to cut our 1-inch long webbings, 52 inches long each. So now we have our 2 handles. We just need one of them for now. So you're going to take your handles and you're going to pin them on the outer edges of your markings. So here is one of my markings that's closest to the right side. I'm going to pin this on the right side of the marking. We want them on the outer edges of the marking. You can just clip the tops and bottoms. You're more than welcome to use glue or double-sided tape to adhere this to the panel. I'm not that worried about it moving around, so I'm okay with this. So after you have it pinned in place, you want to mark a line on your webbing that is 3 inches down from the top of your panel, only on the webbing. Now we're going to take this to the machine and we're going to top stitch along our webbing all the way to that mark and then back down to the bottom. Alright, so now you have the right strap attached. This is the one that's closest to the zipper pocket. Go ahead and unclip everything. Now, before we attach the left-hand strap, we actually want to fold the pocket under because we do want to sew over this pocket when we're attaching the next strap. That's going to hold the pocket in place so that it doesn't get all bunched up inside of our bag. Make sure your strap is straight before you pin it down to the other side. And again, we're going to pin on the outside. So this time it's going to be on the left side of our line. So I just clip it to the bottom and the top, and I just watch my line as I'm sewing. Once again, you want to mark 3 inches down from the top of your exterior panel on your webbing. Double check and make sure your handle isn't twisted. Make sure it's nice and straight. It looks good. And we're going to do the same thing, except this time when we sew it, we want to make sure we include this pocket panel. Alright, so now you should have one strap attached to your bag. We're going to go ahead and repeat these exact same steps for the other exterior panel that doesn't have the zipper pocket. The one thing you want to remember when attaching this is that the top of your panel has this gap between the fleece and the fabric, so just make sure that's on the top. And then just do the same thing. So now you should have both of your straps attached to both of your exterior panels. So now we're going to attach our strap connectors. Since we're using webbing, we need 2 pieces that are 10.5 inches long each. Here are your strap connectors. Now take one of them and fold it under about 1 inch. Grab one of your D-rings and just slide it into that crease. And then just clip it down. Do the same for the other side. Alright, and now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew as close to this D-ring as we can. In order to do that, I suggest using a zipper foot. So now grab an exterior side panel and grab the template for that side panel, also known as the end panel. So you can use this to mark the center line, again using just chalk for this. What we're going to do is we're just going to center our strap connector over this line with the raw edge along the raw edge of the bottom of the end panel and the folded over raw edge underneath, just like that. Now if it makes it easier, you can go ahead and apply some double-sided tape to your strap connector to hold it in place. So just lay it along the center of your strap connector, pull off the paper, and then just line it up over that drawn line so that it's centered over it. Just like that. And now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this on using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way up to that line next to the D-ring and then back down. We're going to use a 3mm top stitch. I'm actually going to sew the 2 vertical lines separately and I'll show you why at the machine. But first let's go ahead and tape the other strap to the other end panel. Alright, so I'm going to start at the bottom with a 3mm stitch length and a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch at the bottom. And then I'm going to work my way all the way up to my stitches on my webbing. Okay, once I get there, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to go a few stitches and then back stitch. And go all the way to the edge and then back stitch. Now, when I turn my fabric, my presser foot doesn't like this bulk from the D-ring over here. So what I do is I just cut off just like that. And then I go back down to the bottom of my strap connector and I'm just going to go straight up till I get to this line and then back stitch again. And that's how I attach my strap connector. Now you can go ahead and do that to the other one. So now we have our strap connectors attached to our end panels. Now we're moving on to step 6, which is the piping. I do consider this optional. If you don't have piping, if you don't feel comfortable working with piping, go ahead and skip this step. But it does provide a really cool look to the bag. So I wouldn't suggest shying away from it if you're just nervous. Go ahead and give it a try. So this is my little ball of piping that I made the other day. When you're starting, go ahead and have about 1 inch of piping hanging over the edge, just like that. And then I just use clips to clip it on. The bulky side of your piping, so like the smushy side of your piping, should be inside the bag, and your raw edges should be on the outside. So first I just clip on my tail, and then I just go around and clip the raw edges of the piping against the raw edges of my end panel. Once you get to the bottom, go ahead and overlap them. So it says to overlap them 1 inch, so I say just overlap them against the entire webbing, just like that. And then let about 1 inch hang off the edge of your piping. So you should have something like this, where you have your tails and they overlap about 1 inch on the bottom. All right, so do this exact same thing for the other end panel. So now we're gonna go ahead and take this to the sewing machine, and we're gonna baste on the piping. What we're gonna do is we're gonna use about a 3mm stitch length, and we're just gonna use our zipper foot and just go over the previous stitches on our piping as close to the bubbled part as we can, all the way around the bag. And when you get down to the bottom, make sure you go over both areas, leaving the tails. All right, so after you have it basted, you can go ahead and trim off these ends. What you can do now is you can just kind of clip into the seam allowance, just about halfway, every 1/2 inch or so. This is going to make applying the panels in the next step much easier. Do the same to the other end panel. All right, we can go ahead and set these to the side for now. Grab both of your exterior main panels and lay them right sides together with the top ends on the same side, and line up all of your edges. So take your handles and tuck them down into the center of the bag. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew along the top edge. So go ahead and use your clips to clip them together. So now we're going to baste together our top edges in preparation for the zipper. So on both ends of the top of our exterior panels, we're going to sew for 1/2 inch. We're going to backstitch heavily here. In between, we're going to use our largest stitch length. So for me, that's a 6mm stitch length. So we're going to start at the top, backstitch, go all the way down using a 6mm stitch length. Once we get to the bottom 1/2 inch away from the edge, we're going to do the backstitching again. We're using a 1 inch seam allowance here. Okay, so now that you have the top stitched together, we're going to open them up. And what you want to do is press this top seam open. Just press along that seam. Make sure your handles underneath are pulled out of the way. Okay, so now we're going to apply the handbag zipper. If you're doing the medium, this is going to be a 20-inch long zipper. If you're using zipper tape, you might want to go ahead and sew off the ends so that way your zipper pull doesn't accidentally fly off. Once again, we can use our double-sided tape and just make sure you get it right on the edge of the zipper tape. We don't want any of the tape to show after we sew it in. Okay, so now we're going to apply our zipper to our bag. So move your bag so that you have easy access to the center. And we're going to apply our zipper tape face down and centered. Do your best to just center the tape. All right, so now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're actually going to sew from this side of the fabric about 1/4 inch away from this middle seam here. And that should include our zipper tape. Before I get started sewing, I'm actually going to open up some of my zipper. Just like that. So that way if I am able to, I will move the zipper as I'm sewing. So we'll discuss that as we get to it. What you want to do is you want to grab the zipper pull and pull it up. That'll make moving the zipper much easier. Alright, do the same along the other side. Honestly, I'm not a fan of applying zippers this way because I don't like not being able to see what I'm doing. Alright, so now grab your seam ripper and just rip the middle seam, leaving those 1/2 inch edges on the very ends. And this should just expose the zipper that we just sewed on. This creates a somewhat hidden zipper, which is a nice look. So next, lay your exterior panels right sides together and match up the bottom edges. Sew along the bottom edges at 1/2 inch seam allowance using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length, just like we've already done. So you should have the sides open, the top with a zipper, and the bottom edges sewn together. You can go ahead and trim this bottom seam allowance down to 1/8 inch. Now we just repeat these exact same steps with the lining panels, except we don't attach a zipper. So take both of your lining pieces, right side up, right sides together, and pin them together at the top. Okay, just like before, we're going to sew for about 1/2 inch on both sides of the top. And we're going to backstitch heavily during this 1/2 inch. For the rest of it, we're going to sew at a 6 millimeter stitch length. We're going to be using a 1 inch seam allowance. Okay, just like before, we're going to press this top seam open. And then using our seam ripper, we'll go ahead and remove the basting stitches that are between the edges. Make sure you leave those 1/2 inch edges sewn together. Now take your lining panels and place them right sides together. And we're going to sew along the bottom edge. Go ahead and pin your bottom edges together. And we're going to sew this bottom edge together at a 5/8 inch seam allowance using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. Once you have the bottom edges sewn together, go ahead and trim the seam allowance down to 1/8 inch. And your lining is ready to go. So now it's time to assemble the bag. Grab your end panels, and you can use your template for your end panels to mark the middle of the top and the bottom. Do this for both end panels. So now we're going to apply our exterior end panels to our exterior main panels. Grab your exterior main panel that you have sewn together. And make sure you know where the top is. That's where the zipper is. So starting at the top, line up right sides together your end panel with your main panel. Use your midpoint mark and just pin that in the center of the zipper up top. Go ahead and use some clips to hold it together. And now flip it over and do the bottom. Where your seam is, go ahead and clip your midpoint mark on the bottom of your end panel with that seam. Now you can just go around the edges and clip it all together. These can be a little tricky because they're curves, and curves are tricky. Just do your best to go all the way around. right, so now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew on this entire end panel. We're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance and a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. So then once you have one end panel attached, just do the exact same thing on the other side. All right, once you've attached both of your end panels to your exterior, you're just going to repeat this process for the lining. So once again, mark the midpoints using your template on the top and the bottom of the end panels. And then pin them to the sides of the lining, the same way you did with the exterior. Right sides together. Make sure the top is going towards the zipper opening. Clip the bottom as well. You do the tops and the bottoms first, and then we work on the curves. Okay, once you have both of the end panels sewn onto your lining, go ahead and trim the seam allowance down to about 1/8 inch. Now it's time to attach the lining to the bag, and you're just about done. So take your exterior and flip it right side out. So here is your duffel. I know it's really big, guys. So you have your duffel exterior side out. Take your lining wrong side out and just put it inside of your exterior duffel. So what you want to do here is make sure that when you clip your lining in place, you clip it so it overhangs the zipper just as much as the exterior panel does. So first let's clip our corners. So now we're going to go along the edge of the zipper and see how the exterior kind of comes up over the zipper just a little bit. We want the lining to do the same. So you can really just eyeball this. So now all we have to do is take this to the sewing machine and top stitch over our previous top stitches that are already on the exterior. This is going to attach the lining to the zipper and the exterior of the bag. So if your machine can't quite get the very corners of your bag, you can just hand sew those closed, and I'll show you how to do that. So you might see you have a bit of an opening on the very ends. To close this up, we're just going to use some hand stitches. So use your hand sewing needle of choice and just the same thread that you used at your machine. Pull off about 24 inches of the thread and thread your needle. You can go ahead and just tie off the ends. I like a double thread when I'm hand sewing bags like this. So you can just wrap the ends around your needle 3 or 4 times and pull that loop to the end so you have a knot. So when I start, I'm going to enter my needle in between the exterior and the lining, and I'm just going to try to line it up with the stitches from the top stitching. And really all you do is just go back and forth. This isn't a very noticeable stitch. I make my stitches pretty small just for secure purposes. Unless you're using a contrasting thread, no one's really going to see these stitches. So just go all the way to the corner. So when you get to the edge, I just put my needle right in that seam where the piping is and follow it along like that. And like I said, as long as you're using coordinating thread, you're not really going to see these stitches anywhere in the bag. And then just go along to the other side, following that piping until you get to an intersecting line. All right, to finish off, I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to push it through the exterior, but I'm going to let it come up right around the zipper. So it's not going through the zipper or the lining. And then what I do is I just put my needle under one layer of the exterior fabric just for about 1 millimeter, really, just a tiny bit. Pull it out so that I have this loop here, and I stick my needle through that loop and then tighten it. And that just makes a nice little secured knot. You can do this a couple times. And then when I'm all done, I take my needle and I insert it right where that knot is. I push it into the exterior fold right here, just for like 1 inch. Push it out. And what this is it just hides the tail. And then I trim it right where it is at the fabric. And there you go. That is how you stitch close the end of your zipper. And you can do the same thing for the other side. If you are like me and you forgot to add the bottom stabilizer, go ahead and use your seam ripper to make a hole in the bottom of your lining. Now take your stabilizer so that it's sticky side down and put it in that hole. And what you want to do is you want to lay it nice and flat along the bottom of your bag. All right, once you have your stabilizer in a spot you're happy with, this is actually helpful that the lining's already in here because it can be a little difficult to iron on top of the stabilizer. So with the bag open like this, we can just iron over our lining to adhere the stabilizer to the exterior. All right, so what I do is I actually just put my iron inside my bag carefully and hold it down over that stabilizer. Your lining is acting as a pressing cloth right now, which is actually really helpful. Now, if you did this in the right order, you wouldn't have your lining in here yet, and then I would suggest just using an actual pressing cloth, but doing it the same way. Putting your iron in the bag and pressing it down to the bottom of the bag. All right, and if you did like I did and had to cut a hole on the bottom of your lining, you can go ahead and hand stitch that together or just top stitch it. But your bag part is done. Now let's finish up the strap. So if you're using the webbing, you need to cut it at 60 inches long. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold both of your ends under about 1/2 inch. I just use pins to help hold it all together. And then fold it over again 3/4 inch. Doesn't have to be exact. Grab one of your adjustable straps and you're going to just slide the end over that middle bar. And you want that middle bar to go into that 3/4 inch double fold over. So if you have to adjust it differently, that's fine. But essentially you want it like this, where you have it double folded, no raw edges showing, and the middle bar wrapped up in there. So now we're just going to sew along this just a couple times to make sure it's nice and sturdy. After you have your strap adjuster on there, slide a swivel on so that you have your adjuster on one end and your swivel on the other. Take the end that's not attached to an adjuster and slide it over your strap adjuster. So you should now have one end that has your swivel hook, your strap adjuster in the middle, and then another end that is awaiting its swivel hook. Grab your other swivel hook and nestle it in that 3/4 inch crease. And then just like you did with the strap adjuster, we're just going to sew a line to hold down this hook.
All right, we did it. Whoo, that was like a marathon bag making activity. Oh my goodness. Honestly, I made all the mistakes. Every mistake you can make with this bag, I made it. It's just what I do. And I hope that it showed you, though, that if you make the mistakes, there are ways to get around it. So here is our awesome duffel bag. I was going for a more like basic, simple design with this one versus this one, which is more fun. So this is the small size and this is the medium size. You can see they work really, really well together. I love it. I mean, it's just a basic duffel, but man, you have this big pocket inside. You can put everything in it. I will say that the hardest parts are attaching the side panels because they're curves, and curves are just, they're difficult, right? Don't feel bad if you have to kind of pinch some of your fabric so that it fits right. If it's pleated, especially if it's a lining, no one's going to see it. Don't worry about it. Piping, if you don't want to do the piping, don't do the piping. Here's our adjustable strap connector. And this is honestly, it's just a heavy duty strap. If you had a gym bag or a duffel bag or a messenger bag that has a removable strap, you don't even have to make this. Just take it off of that bag and use it with your duffel bag. Why not? You don't need a strap on every single bag. So here's that. There we go. You can see it's really cool. You can put all kinds of fun stuff in there. Man, I love this. I love this duffel bag. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider clicking the subscribe link down below. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Currently, it is the end of 2019. 2020 is coming up. We got a lot of fun stuff coming on the channel. I hope you'll be around to see it. If you have any questions whatsoever, you can leave them in the comments down below. You can shoot me an email at jessica@oklaroots.com, or you can join our Facebook group, which is OklaRoots Creatives, over on Facebook, and you can ask anybody there anything. We have folks in the group who are way more advanced sewers than I am, and they are more than happy to answer all of your questions. Thanks again. Get out there and make something.